Hello, this is my final video in the series on resource mobilization and the Bābī movement, this one on strategic choice and tactical management. So, as I've said, this comes from an old paper that I wrote with Moojan Momen back in 1986 called The Bābī Movement, a Resource Mobilization Perspective. Two general points about this series of videos. There's still a lot of work to be done in the field of Bābī studies. No doubt further research will add to our understanding of this complex movement, so whatever I say here is not set in stone. Secondly, the paper on which these remarks are based is primarily sociological in intent, so to see in what ways a particular theory within the sociology of social movements is relevant to our understanding of the Bābī movement. It's not meant to be a major contribution to historical research, although it does contain research on social and ethnic composition, which at the time of publication was relatively new. So first of all, let's talk about strategic choices. In the previous video, I talked about organizational flexibility within the Bābī movement. And given that flexibility, questions of strategic choice and tactical management are central. And in trying to understand this, I found Robert Lauer's work useful. Basically, he says that movements are, or suggests that movements are differentiated in terms of the three strategic choices: their primary target for change, who is expected to implement change, and whether or not they use force. And secondly, by the degree of consensus and persistence with which these choices are pursued. The framework of strategic choices outlined by Lauer can be summarized in this figure. So we have 6 different types of movement here: small groups, educative groups, separatist groups, bargaining groups, revolutionary groups, and disruptive groups. And they're divided by 3 different choices, strategic choices, as per Lauer's framework. So first of all, is the primary target the individual? Is the movement seeking individual change, or is it seeking change in the social structure? Secondly, is the expectation that the change is going to be made or accomplished by the movement, or is it going to be made by the society as a whole? And then finally, is violence seen as a possible element in accomplishing these goals? Now let's try to apply this framework to the Bābī movement. Without leadership agreement as to strategy, a movement in an unstable environment is liable to pass through a series of variant ideological and strategic phases. Given the organizational flexibility of Babism and its later loss of communicative cohesion, this is precisely what occurred. Given the Bābī's intention to establish the theocratic kingdom of the Mahdi, their predominant target for change consistently remained that of the social structure rather than the individual. Individual change was subsumed under broader societal objectives. In Lauer's terms, the educative and small group options were not relevant possibilities, and the strategic choices were those concerning the use or non-use of violence and of the location of responsibility for effecting change, that is, whether the society as a whole or the movement itself was expected to play the primary role. Consequently, the movement's development may be described in terms of its leaders' changing responses to these 2 strategic choices. Although it's difficult to reconstruct the exact changes involved under the pressure of events, Bābī's strategy appears to have changed from social bargaining to social disruption, and then, for a minority, to revolution. Initially, Bābī leaders eschewed the actual use of force, though not the concept of its use, and were in clear expectation of the eventual support of the wider society for the establishment of a Babi theocracy. Their strategy, therefore, was one of bargaining in Lauer's terms. When society proved unsupportive and the Babis were attacked, a reconsideration of strategic choices became vital. Tensions then developed within the movement over the choice of strategy. The ideological division between Babi conservatives, that's my term, and radicals mirroring the strategic one. In the changing circumstances of the time, the conservative option, that is, the continuance of non-violence and the expectation that society would arise to implement the desired change, proved increasingly untenable, however. More radical strategies soon came to the fore. The expectation of societal support was apparently stronger than the commitment to non-violence. The separatist choice of non-violent sectarian communitarianism seems never to have been considered. Still perhaps hoping for a widespread uprising in their favor, or perhaps divine intervention, the Babi leaders were drawn into disruptive action involving relatively limited use of violence. The conflict at Sheikh Tabasi became a spiritual pronunciamento for the cause of the Mahdi. When this failed and all hope of support was lost, effective strategic coordination of the movement came to an end. In the absence of such coordination, tactical responses to local situations tended to determine events. Some of the remaining Babi leaders, such as Subazal, Sheikh Ali Turshizi, and Suleiman Khan, unsuccessfully gave their support to revolutionary terrorism. Thereafter, the movement was destroyed. As the wider social environment became more hostile, tactical management became more constrained. This had several aspects. At the outset of the expansion of their movement, the Babi leaders were often able to act with relatively little risk to their persons. Opposition was ill-coordinated, and the nature of the Babi cause, and even the name of the Bab himself, were unknown. Confrontations with clergy had the advantage of surprise, and if not physically restrained, a Babi missionary might well attract considerable interest in his master's teaching. Later opposition became more resolute and better coordinated. The risks of Babi membership, let alone of public declarations of faith, became considerable. Concealment, secrecy, and covert proselytism became necessary for all but those Babis who were able to physically defend themselves, or I would add, give themselves over to martyrdom. Conflict management also became more difficult. During the early phase of the movement, potentially conflictual situations could be avoided. Babi missionaries encountering opposition could move on. Indeed, the Bab himself may well have determined to avoid appearing at Karbala in 1845, after hearing of the scale of the hostility which his emissaries had generated amongst the Orthodox ulama. Later, as Babi communities were established and hostility towards the Babis hardened, such avoidance became increasingly difficult. Even if some Babis had not themselves become more militant, the potential for conflict had greatly increased. So that's all I'm going to say about this set of videos. Many thanks, as always, to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement. Thank you for listening. You're always welcome to support my channel. Please do like, comment, and share on the videos. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give Patreon and PayPal links below if you're interested in giving practical support. Next week, we'll move on to a different subject and talk about a book I edited back in 2004 entitled Baha'is in the West. Originally, I was going to give a video presentation on the doctrine of Bādā, which is relevant to our understanding of Babism, but for practical reasons that wasn't possible. Anyway, thank you again for listening and have a good day.